It's a new month, which means it's time to rank all the new releases I saw the previous month from worst to best. Now, if you're wondering why I didn't do one of these in January or February, it's because there was only one new release in January, which was Megan, and one new release in February, which was Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. But March was absolutely stacked, so here's my ranking of all 5 March new releases that I saw. Coming to last place at number 5 is Creed 3. Now, while the movie is well directed and has great performances, I feel the story wrapped up so well in Creed 2 that I thought this movie was kind of an unnecessary addition to the franchise, and it only exists so that the Creed films can be a trilogy. The story wasn't that interesting, mainly because there's nowhere to take the main character after the previous film. The previous films were about Adonis Creed trying to live up to his father's legacy, and by the end of Creed 2, he has done that. His character arc has been wrapped up, and it leaves absolutely nowhere to take his character in this one, so as a consequence, the film rings kind of hollow with very little to no stakes. But if you're a fan of the other Rocky movies and you don't really care much about the story and just want to see some boxing action, because the boxing action in this movie is very well directed, very adrenaline pumping, it's worth the rent. But it's not like the movie completely turned the franchise on its head. If you're fine with something completely safe where you get exactly what you expect, it might work for you. But for me, I felt this film rang hollow. Number 4, Champions. I thought this was a sweet little movie with a lot of heart and a good message. The plot is a bit overly familiar. It has basically the same plot as the Adam Sandler movie 8 Crazy Nights, though most of the humor isn't quite as lowbrow, and it's certainly more charming. Characters are all so lovable, you just want to give them all a big hug, they're genuinely sweet, and they reflect the best of humanity. However, what is a bit disappointing is the amount of sexual content, somewhat off-color humor, and profanity that were completely unnecessary just so that the film could get a PG-13. It could have so easily been a PG movie, could have so easily been family-friendly, but no, they decided for some reason to go edgy. But despite those disappointing elements, I thought Champions was a genuinely heartfelt, funny movie. It's not overly sappy, it doesn't feel manipulative, it all feels genuine, and in my book, with this type of film, that's a slam dunk. Number 3, 65. One of the most original films I've seen in a while, and incredibly well done. Now, out loud, its premise of Adam Driver fights dinosaurs in space, that sounds really stupid, but the film is actually pretty well done. It's not as campy as the premise would have you believe, while also being careful not to take itself too seriously to the point where it loses all credibility. It has the right amount of both. And it's very intense. Harkening back to the scares and thrills of the original Jurassic Park film, this is actually closer to what I was hoping Jurassic World Dominion was going to be, trying to survive on a planet inhabited by dinosaurs. But instead they decided to go the route in Dominion about engineering wasps to control the food population, so this is more along the lines of what that film should have been. An intense thriller with jump scares and action, and for a movie that only has 2 main characters in the entire film, it's fantastic. Adam Driver gives a dramatic performance. It really gives a lot of emotion, making you care about his character's survival. And my only real criticism is that the first act is a bit rushed, and the third act, I think, wraps up a bit too soon. The movie is only around 80 minutes long. I think it probably could have benefited from being around a solid 2 hours, maybe 2 hours 15. I thought this was a dramatic, thrilling, and intense film. Hopefully it gets a bigger following when it hits VOD. Number 2, Shazam! Fury of the Gods. This takes everything that worked about the first Shazam and expands it. The story for the most part is a lot richer, the villains were a lot better written, the humor is a lot stronger, and the ideas from the first film are expanded upon really well. However, what holds it back just a smidge, I think, is that Billy's character arc in this one is not as interesting. In the first film, he was obsessed with finding his birth family, and then by the end of the film learned to accept his adopted family, and there isn't really much left to do with him or take him as a character in this film as a result. He's willing to sacrifice himself in this film for his family, but I didn't feel like his character growth this time around was as strong, he didn't feel as conflicted, and in the end, does feel a bit Deus Ex Machina. But also, given that this film focuses very heavily on Greek mythology, and the term Deus Ex Machina does stem from that, I'm going to give that element of it a pass just because I think it does fit within the world and rules of the film. Most other films, I'd be a lot harsher for doing something like what this film did, but I think it makes more sense for this one. I had a lot of fun with it, though it wasn't quite as strong as the first film. And the best movie I saw in March 2023 is Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. I'd say this is like a fantasy version of Guardians of the Galaxy. A group of outlaws teaming up for redemption and get back what's been taken from them. Chris Pine's character, the suave, swashbuckling, quick-witted leader, much like Star-Lord. Michelle Rodriguez's character is this tough warrior woman like Gamora. There's a sarcastic animal character like Rocket Raccoon. And even though it has the Dungeons & Dragons name tied to it, you could take that away completely and still have it be a fresh story a fun fantasy film. It would still work on its own. This has the perfect amount of serious as well as cheese. This is if you threw Princess Bride, Willow, and just a hint of Monty Python into a blender. This is what you would get. It's serious and dramatic enough when it needs to be, but also lighthearted and fun enough to keep you entertained. The script is quick-witted, it's sharp, the action is invigorating and exhilarating. It's a movie that everyone can enjoy. It rolls a perfect 20, and this month it's the best movie I saw, so it gets a number 1. Share your ranking of the March 2023 release that you saw, and if you're wondering where Paint is, because I did review that back in March, that's technically an April release. That'll be next month on my April list. So that's the list of movies that came out in March that I saw from worst to best. Let me know what you guys thought, and I'll see you next time.